The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, this is Jeremy Schiefling, Associate Director with Ross Career Services and Ross MBA grad, class of 2012. I'm super excited to be chatting with you guys today. We're about to get started in a second. Just so you know, your audio is muted, but you can absolutely ask questions at any point using the GoToWebinar interface. Now what I'm going to be doing is sharing my screen, so as you guys go along here, you'll be seeing that. I'm also going to be very interactive, so at some point, get ready for a chance to actually do a live off-campus search right through this webinar. So stay tuned for that. Since it's now 7 o'clock back in Ann Arbor, we will go ahead and get started. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you guys. One moment. And let me know, by the way, through the comments if you have any trouble hearing me or anything else. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so as you may know, every year some students get jobs with companies that recruit on campus. Deloitte, Amazon, Citi, all those familiar names. While many others actually find positions off campus, everywhere from Starbucks to Tesla. But what you may not know is that everyone should spend at least some time looking off campus, even if you ultimately take a job on campus. And that's because the off-campus search isn't just an important part of your career development at Ross. I'm going to make the argument today that it's actually going to be the most important thing you learn at your entire time at Ross. Which is pretty crazy, right? Especially since I totally understand why the on-campus search process can be so alluring. After all, you spent your whole life working really hard. From school to standardized tests, it's been a real slog. I totally appreciate that. You jumped through hoop after hoop, only to grind it out in the workforce. And then when you decided you were ready for a change, you took more tests. You wrote more essays. And finally, you've made it. Not just to business school, but to the promised land, where companies flow like water, and jobs are served to you on a silver platter. After all that, why wouldn't you want to just kick back and focus on the companies that come to you? Well, let me give you two reasons. First of all, check out this number. 30%, as in 30% of students end up getting a job off campus each year. As in the next time you're in class, look to your left, then look to your right. One of you 3 students is going to be going down this road. And with odds that high, you may as well be prepared. But that's not the most important reason. No, the most important is that not at least checking out your off-campus options would be cheating yourself. It would be like walking into Damian Beal's operations class, getting all pumped up to solve Pepsi's supply chain problems, and then right when you're about to crack the case, right on the precipice, Professor Beal says, "Psych! Don't waste your time, bro. Here's the answer." Which might mean that you've got one more free night for Rick's, but when it comes time to interview for that hot supply chain job, and they ask you about lean manufacturing, uh-oh. Well, that's exactly what focusing exclusively on on-campus recruiting is like. Because as enticing as it might feel after busting your butt in school and work for the last 20 years, it ultimately doesn't prepare you for the real world. And you've got a lot of real world left in front of you. 20, that's the number of jobs over the course of a career that someone in business school today is expected to have after they leave school. And guess how many of those are going to come right to you in the same way that the on-campus approach does? Nope, you're going to have to earn those jobs the old-fashioned way through a combination of self-awareness, research, positioning, networking, and referrals. In other words, the very same skills that you perfect doing an off-campus search. And that's why I say that getting practice with an off-campus search is the single most important thing that you're going to learn at Ross. Because long after you've forgotten all those advanced Excel skills, you're still going to be using and benefiting from the exact same job search skills you sharpened right here. Which means that not only are these skills critical to your future success, it would be downright unethical for us not to help you hone them. And to that end, I want to teach you a system today that makes the off-campus search just as logical as the on-campus one, so that no matter how you find your next job, you're going to have the tools you need to find your 20th one. And here's how it works. So based on the process that I use for my own off-campus search, there are really just 3 steps you need to follow. The first one is you have to have a list of companies to target. There are way too many opportunities out there in the ocean, so you have to have a filter. You've got to get focus. And then once you have that initial focus, you want to find a connection at each one who can help you get your foot in the door. That person who sort of gives you access to opportunity that you never had before. And then third and finally, you want to build a relationship there that gives you that edge on your dream job. So to show you how it works in practice, I'm actually going to give someone on the line right now a chance to have their career mapped out before their eyes. So all this hard work that you have to do yourself, I'm going to do for you right now. And the way we're going to choose this is the first person to chat in on the question side is going to have a chance to walk with me through this entire process, start to finish. So go ahead and chat in if you're interested in taking part, right in the question section. All right, so let's see, who's interested? All right, Colleen Hill is the first one I see here. Awesome. So Colleen, do you mind going to your audio section and then actually unchecking the mute box, if you can do that? Actually, I can do that for you, I believe. So Colleen, you're unmuted. Can you speak? Colleen?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you great. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool, cool. All right. So we're about to get down to this. Are you sure you're game for this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. I love that. Okay, so here we go. I actually have a whole sort of tracker that we're going to use to go through this process. And basically, you're going to have this as a take-home favor, sort of like a parting gift on a game show. But in fairness, I will be giving it to all your classmates as well. So I really appreciate you being the guinea pig here and sharing your experience. So to get started, basically what we're going to do is we're going to put together a list of potential employers for you. Because I think the biggest challenge where a lot of MBAs get stuck is they say, you know, Jeremy, I'm not necessarily super inspired by the employers on campus, but I don't even know where to begin off campus. Like, how do I sort of get off that initial rut or get out of that initial rut and start finding companies? And so if you don't mind, Colleen, I'll take notes and I'll interview you in the course of this conversation. Do you have a couple of like dream employers that immediately come to mind when I say, who would you love to work for after graduation?
Sure, there are a few. I guess the main ones that come to mind would be maybe Dahlberg,
Mm-hmm.
the Gates Foundation, um, and maybe BCG. I'm sort of looking at international development consulting in Africa, so
Interesting.
companies that have offices over there.
Very cool. And so that's a great place to begin. Now, what you're going to see that I recommend here on the right-hand side of the screen is that you would actually come up with a list of 10. But in the interest of sort of moving
Okay,
this thing along, we'll go to the next step,
sure.
which is, okay, let's say you only have 3 dream employers, which is totally fine. You know, maybe you don't even know the universe of what's out there. Well, where do you go next? How do you build that list out a little further? And so I think a great tool for that, something that I actually used to work on when I worked at LinkedIn, which is a tool called linkedin.com/alumni. And basically what this does is it takes all these 40,000 Ross alums on LinkedIn and it starts to filter them by all these things that might be of interest to you. So where they live, where they work, what they do. And I think because of the way that it's set up, it's actually a really nice Facebook of sorts to get a sense of what's possible for Ross MBAs. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to search some of these terms. And I want you to tell me, Colleen, if you see any companies that seem interesting to you. So you mentioned international development. Is that a big priority of yours?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just search that real quick. I'm just going to put it in quotes because I think those words are so common. It looks like about 400 Ross alums have that on their
Wow.
profiles. And so
Cool.
let's just sort of like browse down through this list. Like, tell me if you see any companies where even if you've never heard of them, it's like, that might be interesting. So we've got DaVita, we've got the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Forest Service, Corporate Traveler USA, HelloFresh. Let's see here. ThinkStep, Accenture.
Yeah, I talked to a couple guys at Accenture at the MBA games, and they talked about the Accenture development partnerships,
Oh,
and that was something that sounded interesting to me, though I don't know much about it yet.
very cool. Let's do maybe one or two more here. And again, feel free to just be inspired, like Curd Green Mountain, Learn Zillion, educational technology startup, new teacher project, Clorox. This person is the vice president of new business development at Tough Mudder. How cool is that?
That's pretty cool.
That's the race where like they shock you with electricity while you're like trying to run through this obstacle course.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Yeah, I can't see the companies too well actually, but
Let me blow up my screen a little bit so you can.
there are a couple that sound good, so.
Yeah. Should we throw on? Let's see here. Endeavor for sure, right? I don't know if you know about them, but
Okay.
like, they're a huge international development organization. Yeah.
Perfect.
Again, what I'm trying to model here is not necessarily this is the be all and end all of your search, so much as you want to open yourself at this stage just to possibility. Say, I don't know what Endeavor is, but maybe I'll check out her profile. Oh, she's done some cool things. She's been at Taproot and these other organizations. I trust my instincts here to at least give it a shot. Put it on the list.
Definitely.
Maybe agriculture program specialist at FinTrack. Sounds like it has an international development component.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, so let's just throw it on. Why not? Okay, so already like 2 minutes into our conversation here, we've got a list of 6 or 7 companies, which is awesome, but we're not done. Now we've looked at some of the low-hanging fruits as far as things that are on your radar to begin with, places where Ross folks have gotten traction in the past. Well, what else can we do? Let's head over to Indeed.com, which is a pretty comprehensive list of jobs, and just start searching for stuff that you might be interested in. And is international development like the prime keyword for you, or are there other ways that you're thinking about searching?
My goal is to be somewhere in Africa.
Somewhere in Africa. Oh, interesting. So like maybe if we put in Africa, and it doesn't even matter what you're doing so much as you have that geographic exposure.
Right. I think yeah, that's a little bit more important to me. I mean, I want it to be some sort of, sustainable, like socially sustainable work.
Okay. So let's start with Africa. We'll see what we come back with. Again, this is totally an experiment. And like the true magician always says, we've not spoken before, have we, Colleen?
No.
No, so this is all unplanned, all unrehearsed. And so let's see what we find here. So interesting, Arabic-speaking research project manager at Gallup. So it looks like Gallup has this whole Middle East and North Africa focus. Throw those guys on the list.
Okay. Yeah, my undergrad major was actually Middle Eastern and North African Studies.
Oh, bam, look at that. Again, I promise I did not pay you anything to say that. All right, let's see here. How about Rockefeller Foundation? Frequent travel to Africa. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And then let's do one more. Development in West Africa, Sassoy.
Yeah, that looks cool.
Yeah.
Never heard of them.
Yeah, which is great. Because like ultimately at this point, you want to build a really large funnel at the very top so that even at the very bottom, when things start to get narrowed down, you're going to have tons of opportunities on the table. So not putting all your eggs in one basket at the beginning, great way to begin. So again, normally you might have, let's say 30 employers at this point, but 10 is a good start.
Okay.
Let's do one final little trick, which is no one knows this about LinkedIn, including LinkedIn employees, I can promise you. But if you went over here and you actually searched for companies, so for example, we typed in Dalberg. Is that how you spell it?
Dalberg.
Okay, there we go. Now, typically, I assume this is Dalberg Global Development Advisors?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Typically, you would just click on it because you're like, oh, they completed it for me automatically. Perfect. In this case, you got to resist that temptation. Just hit the return or enter button on your keyboard, and it's going to give you the list of company results. And here's a little LinkedIn trick. Right underneath the company and the number of employees is a link that says similar. And basically what LinkedIn is doing is behind the scenes, it's looking through all the Dalberg employees and trying to find out who else is similar. What other organizations have similar employees? And hopefully it'll put together a list of organizations that do similar work. So, for example, FSG is a huge consulting organization in the impact space. Huge for that space, I should say.
Hmm.
Have you heard of them?
I've heard of them. I don't know too much about them.
Okay, if we put them on the list.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so put on FSG. And obviously, some of the ones that you're already thinking about, like BCG, for instance, made the cut because there's that connection. Maybe
Hmm.
BSR. All these many acronyms here: BCG, FSG, BSR. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay, BSR. And maybe one more just to round it out. Blue Sky, Commons Consultants. Let's try actually going back to the list real quick. I want to see who else is a peer for the Gates Foundation. Because like obviously Gates is such a like 800-pound gorilla in that space, but who else is
Right.
playing in that space that you don't know about? So again, clicking similar. And aha, there's Rockefeller, so that's confirming that one.
Yeah.
Ford Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, Open Society, George Soros' organization. Any of these inspire you in any way just by looking at the name or the location?
Um, I haven't really heard of many of them, so I would be interested in looking at a handful.
Okay. Let's throw Ford Foundation on because I feel like they're an organization people have heard about, and at least like the name has been bandied about, but like what do they actually do? Are they focused on international
Right.
work? Who knows? So let's put them on there. And now, basically, what we're going to say is okay, we have this list of 13 in our case, but actually more like 40 if you were doing this over the course of like half an hour on your own. So that's a lot of
Okay.
organizations. Now, being
Yeah.
realistic, I assume you're a first year. Is that right, Colleen?
Yes.
I assume that like already, even in week two, you're already feeling overwhelmed. Would that be a fair assessment?
A little bit.
Okay. And there's no shame in admitting it. Everyone is in the same boat. I can promise you that. There's so much happening with classes and extracurriculars and recruiting on campus that even if you want to like do networking and off-campus work with all these organizations, it would be probably hard to find time in the course of the week. So the next thing is how do we take this larger list and start to prioritize based on what's most important to you and where sort of the low-hanging fruit lies. So to do that, we're basically going to walk through these columns here, alumni, motivation, posting, as a way of ranking these organizations. So for alum, what we're going to do is we're going to put a 1 in here if there's a Ross alum who works there, a 0 if there's not. And the idea behind that is essentially saying, all else being equal, if you have two organizations that you want to focus on and only the time to focus on one, go for the one where you have a Rosser who can open a door for you. So again, back to LinkedIn. You can do this a couple different ways. Let me show you actually a different way to do it if you're interested. So going back to like the LinkedIn homepage, yes, you can go to LinkedIn Alumni, which is nice and visual, but in some ways it's even better to use the advanced feature, which is this little button over here. And then what that's going to pop open is school is Ross, company is Dahlberg, current, because you want to make sure that there's someone there who can actually go to bat for you, and then search. And unfortunately, it looks like no rosters there. So there, we would put a 0. Now let's try Gates Foundation. Aha, 12 Ross grads at Gates. Definitely a strong one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so we could go through this entire process, but I think people would start to like get bored and go off to do their strategy homework. So let's just pop in a couple of examples here and just remind yourself to fill these out more accurately after I give the sheet back to you. But yeah, again, you can see how like this is the kind of thing you could do if you're not feeling motivated enough to like do a big group project or whatever. But if you just have 5 minutes, just bang this out. Figure out where you have alumni you can reach out to. Now for motivation, which is the next column, we're going to rate all of these on a scale from 1 to 5. 1 means I don't know anything about this organization. Jeremy just twisted my arm and forced me to put it on the list. All the way to 5, like, man, that would be amazing to work there. I'd be so excited. So if you wouldn't mind, let's just go through this list real quick. And Colin, give me ratings for these. So for Dahlberg, 1 to 5, it feels like a
Let's go 5.
5. Nice. Here's the first one. How about Gates?
4.
4. Okay. Bill won't be pleased, but that's all right.
Also,
Um,
also five.
5 for BCG. How about Accenture?
Four.
4. Now we're getting into this part where like I think these names either were unfamiliar totally or you weren't sure what exactly they did. Endeavor, would that be a 1?
Right. So if I'm not familiar with them, then I would put one. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah. And the idea is eventually you're going to get to them. It just means that probably better to go after the ones where you're already sort of super excited about it because your time is limited. And we'll get to this one
Right.
at some point down the road. FinTrack, is that a 1?
Also one.
Any of these not a 1 down here?
Probably FSG or Rockefeller. I'd put two, and the
Okay,
rest would be one.
cool. All right. Thank you so much. All right, so we got our motivation, and then one last final step here is posting. And so for posting, there's actually a 1 to 3 scale. And I have all this stuff over here in the legend. So even if this seems like we're moving a mile a minute, just know you've got the results and the guidance right next to you. So for posting, what we're trying to do again is figure out, do these guys even hire? Because a lot of times, especially if you're going after smaller organizations, I think BSR was like 10 people or something. You don't want to waste a ton of time going down that road if they only hire anyone every 3 years. And so posting is a proxy for that. And so
Okay.
what we're going to look for is a 3 on Indeed means that they have a job in your function. A 2 just means that they're hiring at all. And a 1 means that they're not even hiring. There are no jobs listed. So let's try this out here. So for Dahlberg, no Dahlberg drugs. So I think that's pretty telling, right? I hate to say that your 5 has a 0 has a 1 there, but yeah. So that's where we're going to start. Let's do Gates Foundation. All right, so Gates Foundation, I assume is definitely hiring. Let me just put that in parentheses to make it a little bit easier to see. Let's actually go at it this way. Like you can see the Gates Foundation down here. Even though I think Indeed is a little bit faster and smoother than LinkedIn, my apologies to my former colleagues. In some ways, LinkedIn makes it a little bit easier because you can search based on specific organizations. So if we go back to LinkedIn, we're going to do, let's see. See if it gives us a drop down. Yeah, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Get rid of that location. Yeah, and sure enough, 70 jobs there. Not too shabby.
Yeah.
The other thing that we want to look for, and this is a little tricky given like maybe the amorphous nature of your search, is whether they're specifically hiring for folks like yourself or positions that you want to do. So for example, they might be hiring for HR all the time, but if you don't want to do HR, that doesn't sort of give you any value. And so do you have a sense of
Right.
like what the function would even be for the Gates Foundation for you?
Probably operations,
Let's see here.
like process operations or like business development.
Let me try searching back up here. Okay. So there are some jobs that are actually mentioning operations. So yeah, I would say this is definitely a strong 3 because they're hiring for operations folks or at least some sort of offshoot of operations. So that's in good shape. Now for the BCG one, that's going to be a little tricky, of course, because you're not just interested in BCG in general. You're specifically interested in international development. Is that right? That
Right.
practice? Okay, so there they
Yeah.
are. Let's
I know
try.
they have an office in Morocco. I don't think they have one anywhere else in Africa.
How cool. Wow. I had no idea. So let's see if we can limit it to Boston Consulting. So many different Boston companies. All right, so this is their global oil markets. Would you consider that like what you're looking for, or that feels a little bit off track,
It's a
right?
little off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe what we say then is, okay, BCG is definitely always hiring, that's for sure, but they're probably not always hiring for international development. That speaks to sort of the niche nature of that kind of role, right?
Right.
Okay. And so again, I'm going to plug in some fake numbers here just to move this along, but like you get the sense of you want to go through, you want to get a sense of what's out there in terms of jobs. But note the one thing that I didn't do. It might be so tempting, maybe not this early in the year, but like at some point, we were like, oh, this job seems so sexy. I want to read a million things about it, and I want to start even applying for it. The trick is to resist that temptation, because ultimately, with this whole process, you're trying to force yourself to stay as focused as possible. And then in the end, after you have your prioritized list of companies, after you start to network a little bit, that's when you're actually going to strike it rich by getting an awesome job at an organization that you're really excited about. If you start applying willy-nilly now, you're not going to have that focus. You're not going to have that systematic approach behind you, giving you extra advantage in the process. So resist the temptation. Okay. So now here's the fun part, Colleen. Are you feeling pretty good about this, aside from the fake data?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got some good organizations, interesting organizations. We've rated them in different ways. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take these columns, take this information, we're going to go to data, we're going to sort this range. Say it's got a header row, and then we're going to sort in 3 different ways. So first we're going to sort by motivation in descending order, because again, a 5 is more powerful than a 1. And that speaks to the same thing that you had in Grad Leader. Like, Grad Leader is basically telling you, or Career Leader, excuse me, like, follow those instincts. If you feel like there's a really cool job out there for you and you want to be doing it, don't put a deaf ear to that. Instead, listen to that motivation. And that's why we're going to make that the number 1 sort priority. Once we have that, we're going to sort by posting. Because again, posting is a proxy for, is this even realistic? Will there even be jobs for me to get no matter how motivated I am? And then finally, you're going to sort by alumni, because that's your ace in the hole. Even if the motivation is strong and the posting is strong, the alumni is the person who's going to ultimately help you get your foot in the door. So we want to sort by all 3 of those things. And let's see who rises to the top. So BCG, Dahlberg, Gates Foundation. How are you feeling about those results there?
Pretty good.
Pretty good, okay. And remember, this would be a little more exciting if you had like 50 organizations on your sheet. And then it would start to like really give you a sense of the different hierarchies. But at least for now, if I said to you, okay, you're going to go out there and you're going to go after a couple of organizations this week realistically, at least you have your marching orders. You know where to focus your limited time. Feels good?
Feels good.
Okay. So that's sort of the fun part. That's the part where it's like, okay, I can do this without actually talking to anyone. I can just like do this in my pajamas, like late at night. This is great. But now the next phase is where the rubber hits the road, which is where we actually have to find folks we can talk to and begin those conversations. Because I think as everyone knows intuitively, if someone likes you, if you have a relationship with someone, that person is way more likely to go to bat for you with a closed list or job opportunity than someone who basically just sees your resume for the first time at the point of hiring. And so to sort of build those relationships, here's what we're going to do. So should we start with BCG International Development? Is that a good place?
Sure.
Okay. So let's find an alum there. And again, we're going to go back over to LinkedIn. You can see LinkedIn is going to get a lot of usage. One thing I should note is everything I'm doing right now doesn't involve a premium filter or buying any kind of premium package from them. Everything I'm doing here is for free. So there's no reason to buy a subscription, even if it would make my stock options look better there. So that being said, let's use BCG as the example here. So now here's an interesting technique that I want to show. You can definitely do current company, and you probably should at some point. What I like to do early on in an off-campus search is actually look for someone who used to work there. And the reason for that is, imagine now that you have 50 or 60 companies here, Colleen. Can you apply reasonably to 50 or 60 companies in any kind of high quality way?
No.
Probably not, right? And
I could, but it would take a long time.
Take a long time. And like, as you've seen from Ross, you're drinking out of a fire hose right now. So time is definitely not on your side. To that end, what I would say is, even if it feels painful to knock a company off your list, that's actually a good sign. Like if you talk to someone at this company, it turns out, actually, BCG is not for you. Its culture is wrong for you, and its programmatic work is wrong for you. That's amazing because you just saved yourself 10 or 20 hours on an application for a company you wouldn't have been happy at anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas if you talk to someone who's currently there right away, Ross alums are going to want to be honest with you and give you the real deal, but they're also accepting a paycheck from that organization. Their college fund is being paid for by that organization. And so it's tough to be totally 100% authentic with you in that kind of scenario, where someone who's left the company has that advantage. So let's say ex-Boston Consulting. Let's say they went to Ross. One thing I'm going to mention about this, by the way, is if you ever run into a situation where you're not getting any results, try searching just the University of Michigan. Like, so many folks only look within Ross's walls, whereas in fact, even with 40,000 alums, we're tiny compared to the overall university, which has more than 200,000 on LinkedIn. So always think about that as well. But we start with Ross because I think that has the sort of most proximity to us right now. So again, used to work at the Boston Consulting Group, went to Ross, and let's throw in international development to see if we can sort of find that right person. Is that the term that they use, Colleen?
I'm not sure, actually.
Okay. Maybe we'll find someone at least who has that passion, or maybe speak to that part of the practice. So it turns out that sure enough, there are 7 former BCG Rossers with a focus on international development. And so our trick here would be to find someone who we can actually put on our list. So going back to this, let's throw out these first degree folks, because I think that's too easy. Let's say that everyone is a second degree. There's a Tough Mudder person, senior analyst at Princeton, manager at the Midyard Network. To me, that one feels really interesting, right? As well as senior consultant at FSG. Because these folks went from BCG into social impact work.
And they're in California, which is where I'm from, so added bonus.
Does one of them just like reach out to you? They both have great smiles. Does one seem perfect?
They both look great. Let's go with Ashanti.
Go with Ashanti. All right. We check out Ashanti's profile. Sure enough, she left Boston Consulting Group last year. Now she's at a Midyar. Look at that, some international market stuff. So I don't know, I can't tell exactly if she was on international development. Looks like probably not. But I'm guessing that because of her interests, she would at least understand how that world works, right? So you could say, yeah, I want to be in international development at BCG too. Here are the obstacles that were in my way that you'll face as well. So I think she'd probably be a really good person to talk to. Now, how are we going to get her email address? What are we going to do, Colleen?
Look in the Michigan Alumni Directory.
Nice. I like the way you think. I don't want to just call out because you're obviously on the advanced track already, Colleen. A lot of students do, and what I used to do is I would go, let me go connect with Ashanti. And I would reach out to Ashanti and I'd type this little note. But then after I punched in a lot of stuff and poured my heart out, then LinkedIn would say, you're over the character limit. And then I would, tailor it way down. And then I would reach out to Ashanti and she would never respond to me. And basically what I've come to realize is like, maybe in a truly desperate moment you can use that, but trying to connect with an alum who doesn't know you already just feels a little weird because basically it's saying, in order for the two of us to talk, you have to invite a stranger into your personal network. And a lot of people just aren't comfortable with that. So I don't recommend just sort of putting in a personal note with your connection request. I recommend going right to Ashanti's email address that she's checking 100 times a day. So the way we're going to get there is exactly as Colleen mentioned, we're going to go to the alumni directory. So I have a little shortcut for it. You guys should definitely bookmark it at some point. If you ever need to find it, you go to Ross Directories, and then looking for alumni, and then you're back here. And the thing to know about this is that there's 2 approaches to it. Number 1 is just the name. In addition, you also have these advanced search options, very much like LinkedIn, where you could say, I want to find an herb alum, or I want to find someone who is also in my same section, or whatever, just so you can sort of tailor that search. But in this case, let's stick with Ashanti and see if we can get by with just her first name. Nope. All right, so let's go back. Here we go. I have to tell you how nervous I am right now typing in public, Colleen. This is like my worst nightmare. I wake up at night with like nightmares.
You're doing great.
Okay. I guess I didn't do so great though. Let me try that again. There she is. All right. Awesome. So basically there's her email address. And just so you guys know, you guys have your University of Michigan emails for life. So this is never going to change. It's never going to say, umich.alumni.edu or something like that. And what that means is pretty much everyone in probably the last 5 to 10 years who's like grown up with these email addresses, they're going to have set it to forwarding. So Ashanti's going to have it forwarding either to her work email or her personal email. Either case, that's going to be in good shape. Obviously, it's not going to work in every single case, and that's fine. But I think this is the best possible way of reaching her given the limited information we have. So we'll come over here.
I actually used this earlier today to reach out to someone, and she responded after like an hour. So it does work for
Whoa!
anyone who's interested.
I promise I did not bribe Colleen. That's awesome. So come over here and write this message. Now, when you wrote that message that you wrote before, Colleen, the one you were just alluding to, like, how do you even begin that message? How do you talk to an alum like this?
So I just sent her an email and said, "Hi, I'm a first year MBA student at Ross. I had actually just gotten off the phone with someone who was her friend, or still is her friend, and suggested that I reach out to her. And so I said, I just got off the phone with your friend, and she mentioned your name. I'd love to touch base with you about X, Y, and Z. If you have some time, let me know. If not, no problem." Yeah, that's about it.
And I think what you're talking about there is like the power of social proof, right? That whole second degree connection phenomenon where it's like a friend of a
Right.
friend connecting me with you, and for them to turn you down is basically turning their friend down. So I think that's an
Yeah.
amazing approach. What about in Ashanti's case? Like, she is actually a second degree connection with me. So like going back to her profile, there are folks I could go to, like Marina, for instance, who maybe could make an introduction. But let's say she was like third
Sure.
degree or even further beyond. What would you do in that case?
I'd probably still introduce myself similarly and say, "Hi, I'm a first year MBA student at Ross. I noticed that you went to school here, and maybe if she was in my section, I noticed that's on the alumni thing. I could mention that." Um, and then just also mention that it looks like she's done some really interesting work that sounds interesting to me as well.
Mhm.
Obviously phrased better than that. And if she has some time, I'd love to chat with her for a few minutes about her past experience at BCG.
Very cool. Yeah, Colleen, again, you're like blowing up my presentation here because like the typical thing that I hear from an MBA is, hi Shanti, or actually usually it's like, dear Mrs. Rana Singh, I'm a current Ross student. I would really like to get a job at Boston Consulting Group. Can you please help me get a job? Thank you so much. Sincerely, Jeremy. Which is a little bit like maybe a little bit over the top, but that's sort of the idea. And I think the problem with that approach is that even if it's transparent and transactional, it's like too much about yourself, right? It's like, this is what I want, this is what
Right.
you can do for me, blah, blah, blah. Whereas the approach that you've taken here is all about her, right? You went to school
Yeah.
here, you've done some really interesting work. I'd love to learn about your experience. And so I think that's really going to be much more successful. I can promise you, like, as an alum who was working at LinkedIn right out of graduation, I probably got 2 or 3 emails from current students a day throughout the course of the recruiting season. And the ones that I actually went to bat for, did more than just sort of a very quick informational chat, were the ones who like really appealed to say, hey, I want to hear about your experience, Jeremy, your story. And I think that's going to be a very successful strategy. And that being said,
Okay. Good
Colleen,
to
I can tell that you are a total rock star on this thing. For those folks who are feeling like, oh man, I don't have Colleen's gift of the perfect thing to say, I've actually included links not only to all the websites we've used so far, but also to some templates. And so basically, this will give you a starting point for how you want to draft these. And you're going to see there's a strong overlap here between what Colleen just said and what I put into action, where it's all about them, right? We have this connection. You've done awesome things. Learn about your experience, respect for their time, sort of, keep it really limited, and just be like upbeat and positive. I think all of those things are going to help with an alum, who's feeling overwhelmed. The one thing I want to just call out to be clear is I don't want to hear a lot of reports of people using this template verbatim. And the reason for that is if an alum gets 5 emails in a row all using this template, it immediately loses its power, right? It's like, wait a second, I thought this person was genuinely interested in me, but now they're clearly just using a template because their classmates are using the same thing. So what I would say is come in here and like throw in stuff that's particular to that person. Say like, Ashanti, I was really fascinated by the fact that you went from BCG to Omidyar. What was it like to give up the cushy consulting lifestyle or the glamorous consulting lifestyle and go work for an impact-focused organization? What that basically tells the person is you've done your homework. You're investing in them personally. So in the same way that on a first date, you don't want to just say to someone, your clothes look nice in general. You want to say what looks nice about them. You always want to be tailoring. You always want to be personalizing for the person who's receiving this message. So again, use this as a starting point, but don't let it to be the be-all and end-all of your outreach. Okay, so great approach. Now, question for you, Colleen. let's say you send this email out, and even with your amazing approach, Ashanti doesn't respond. How do you deal with that?
I'd probably follow up maybe after a week and say, hey, I just wanted to see if you got this and see if you had some time. If not, no problem. And then that would be it. If I didn't hear from her, no problem. And then I would go back to LinkedIn and reach out to that other guy whose name I don't remember, who we were deciding between in the first place.
Got it, got it. And how would you even like remember to reach out to Ashanti?
I keep my emails, like things that I need to do. I have my email main inbox pretty clear. Maybe for something like this, I would have blind copied myself so that it was in my inbox, and that way I knew that it was something I needed to follow up on.
Right. And what if you had 24 emails out to alums at any given point? How would you keep that straight?
Sure. I might lose track of one here or there, but probably in a similar way. I also have an old school paper planner, and
Nice.
I'd probably go back through that every once in a while and see who I needed to follow up with.
Very cool. Well, for all those folks out there who are not quite as organized as Colleen, let me just suggest that the human brain is not designed for this kind of sort of like long-term thinking and attention to follow-up. I feel like if you think about human evolution, our brains are very binary. It's fight or flight. It's like, what do I have to do right now to get through the day? Whereas, what do we have in our lives that absolutely have none of that evolutionary baggage, that are designed to be perfectly precise over the course not just of days, but weeks and years? Computers, right? And so what I would recommend for everyone is to check out this site called rebump.cc. You can actually get a 30-day free trial, which is probably long enough to get your emails out. And basically what Rebump will do is it'll do what Colleen did, but automatically behind the scenes. And so if Ashanti doesn't respond to Colleen's email after a week or whatever amount of time Colleen sets, it'll automatically follow up with a message that you've created. You know, dear Ashanti, I just noticed that I hadn't heard from you. I know you must be incredibly busy. Would you mind if we could chat sometime next week? And all that happens behind the scenes without you having to spend a single brain cell focused on it. So my recommendation for the ever busy alum is get something like Rebump that will manage it, automatically without your involvement. And that way, no emails slip through the cracks. Because what I've seen in my own experience as a marketer is oftentimes you get a really good response on the second or third email, but very few people ever send those. And so follow up is really key. But again, Colleen, I'm consistently impressed by you. You are on top of this thing.
I mean, that's a much better idea. So definitely something I wrote down.
Cool, cool. And again, all the links are right here. I'm going to share this link out as soon as we're done. Okay, so let's say you ultimately schedule some time with the alum. I've got a template for that as well. That's pretty self-explanatory. Once you actually have Ashanti on the phone, what are you going to talk about with her, Colleen?
Yeah, great question. So this is something I've realized is probably one of my weaker areas. I get people on the phone and I ask some questions and we have a good conversation, but I always feel like there's something that I could be doing a little bit better. So usually I start off I guess it depends on how the call was set up at first, but let's say I would start off by telling them a little bit about my background and why I'm interested in what they've done, and then ask some questions about their background and experience so that they have a framework to help address those questions.
Got it. And so it sounds like in this case, it's like the typical, not even a pitch, but like you're giving your odyssey or your initial story, and then you're sort of digging into what they've done. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. I think that's fine. I do think it may come across a little bit disingenuous if your email is all about them, and then you start with a pitch where a lot of MBAs can't resist the temptation to sort of go into this elevator thing about like, why they belong in this field and blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
What I tend to find more helpful at this stage is actually to ask what I call sort of the magic 7 questions, which are essentially all about them and will put them in a positive frame of mind to help you. And again, I'm sharing the link here. It's included in the Excel workbook. And again, the questions pick up right where the email leaves off. If you're interested in them, talk about how they got into this company, what they spend their time on, what the best part of it, what the worst part of it was. And all of that you're going to be using to go back to your Google Doc and assess, does this organization still belong here? Because like if Ashanti gets on and tells you, BCG were the best 3 years of my life, all I was doing was traveling to Africa every week and creating real impact on the ground. I assume that's going to be catnip for you. Is that right, Colleen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas if she comes back and says, let me tell you the truth about BCG, it's definitely a sexy brand, but honestly, I really wanted to do international development work. They always promised me that I could do it. I never got a chance to do it. Instead, I had to spend my time flying around to Omaha, working on these energy deals, and I was really disgruntled by the time I left. Well, in some ways, maybe Ashanti is saving you going down a road that's not right for you. And so it's not that you should necessarily make a decision based only on Ashanti's advice, but let's say that you have calls with 2 or 3 Ashantis. You're hearing the same story time and again. People who want to work in the space didn't get that opportunity, no matter how much they were promised. In that case, maybe the organization falls on your list and you move to the next one. And so that's why I always start with their experience, because you really want to focus on what does it actually feel like viscerally to be there, and then respond to those. Listen to your inner intuition. Now, let's say that a more positive scenario takes place, and Ashanti is regaling you with these tales of how awesome it was and how much great work she got to do. Then these final 4 questions are really important because they set the stage for everything that comes afterwards. So 4 kind of gets into what you had mentioned, Colleen, in terms of, here's my background, here's my deal. And so Ashanti is going to use that to vet your sort of realistic aspirations for this organization, give you some insider info about whether you could even make it in the first place, which is important. Assuming that she says, hey, you could totally do this, then here's the magic question. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Which isn't, hey, give me a referral or introduce me to your boss or anything like that, which is too forward, too transactional. It just says, at this point, we have a rapport. At this point, we've been going back and forth. I've been learning a lot. You're sort of in this mentorship role already. Now, quite honestly, what would it take for me to get there? And I think a lot of alums, especially those who are diehard Wolverines, are going to say, here's the real deal. No one gets on BCG International Development unless they have a referral from someone on the inside. So what I'm going to do is, even though I don't work there, I'm going to introduce you to someone I know who does, and that person can help you out. And again, you can get there by being very diplomatic and tactful, not just outright asking, hey, give me a referral. Does that make sense, Colleen?
Yeah, definitely.
This is another way to sort of jog that memory, just, hey, is there anyone else I should talk to? And number 7 is really important, especially if this is a person who's still at the company. Because let's say, this person after 10 minutes or 20 minutes on the phone with you isn't 100% sold. They have their own reputation to worry about. Even though they like you, they're like, am I going to put my own reputation on the line to help Colleen out? I'm not sure yet. Whereas if you follow up with this person over the course of the next couple months, and now it's January and now it's referral season, guess who she's going to refer? The person who just reached out to her yesterday for the first time, or the person she's been talking to for 4 months already?
Right.
So I think all these sort of set the stage for the next phase in your adventure. So those are the kinds of things I would focus on. Again, you don't have to be slavish to that list, but I think it gives you a sense of what's possible. Obviously, follow up with a thank you email, template for that. And again, going back to this idea of following up, easy for us to forget, especially in the middle of midterms and West Coast Forum and getting ready for interviews on campus. If you send yourself an email every 1 month at fut.io, it'll actually ping your inbox every single month on a regular basis to follow up with Ashanti. Now, let's say you set that up, Colleen, and you've been reminded to follow up with Ashanti. What are you going to reach out to her about the next month after your first conversation?
I was going to ask you the same thing.
Okay.
I understand the importance of staying in touch with people, but when a month, especially here, moves pretty quickly. So what if you haven't necessarily accomplished anything new in the space that you're working towards? What would you, how would you follow up with that person?
Yeah, so here's what I would say. What do you think Ashanti cares about? Why do you think she's helping you?
Because we are both in the Michigan family.
Mm-hmm. And what specifically does she love about Michigan? Is it the fact that you're going to get a job with BCG? Is that what excites her?
No, it's probably the community and the people.
Yeah. So what if you dropped her an email and you were like, hey, the leaves are turning color here in Ann Arbor. Football team is getting ready for bowl season. Just thought I would drop you a line and let you know that I'm still as excited as ever about BCG. I've really been thinking a lot about what I want to do with my career, and more than ever, I'm pumped up about this. Thank you so much again for everything you've done. I just wanted to let you know how much it helped me. Now, does that email hurt you?
No, not at all.
Oh, it just says like, hey, this is a person who has respect, who has gratitude, and most importantly, to the former point, is helping her reconnect with this community that she feels nostalgic for, right? To be back in Ann
Right.
Arbor again in the fall, like that's a special feeling. And so I know it's going to be hard to appreciate that as a current student, but trust me, like the minute that you move away from Ann Arbor and go off into the world, it becomes a special place in your heart. And I think you can definitely, provide alumni with a feeling of reconnection there.
Yeah, definitely.
And so then finally, crunch time comes, right? Let's say for whatever reason, maybe it just wasn't appropriate to do a referral, or she told you up front, like, hey, we're not even thinking about this right now. We'll be thinking about it in 4 months when we come back to campus. Now it's time to get that referral. What are you going to ask Ashanti in your final email? How do you close the deal here if it hasn't been closed already?
Sure. Um, Maybe ask if she knows the people who might be coming to campus or something who are doing the recruiting and see if she could somehow put me in touch or like send a good word in or something like that.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really smart. Because, of course, those are going to be the decision makers. So that's really important to get in front.
Right.
So I think that's totally fair game. I think the other approach, the one that I was sort of thinking of, was I think this is the point after you have a relationship where a mentor and a mentee can talk to each other in a very different way than an alum and a student who've never met before. Where you can say, like, I'm just feeling really nervous about this. Is there anything else you think I should do at this point that could help my chances of getting on the closed list, if that's the way they're doing it? And I think
Okay.
if you've built that relationship over time, that's a totally fair question to ask because it says, hey, we know at the end of the day, there's a ton of anxiety in business school. There's tons of pressure in business school. If there's any last resource you can marshal to help you out, she's probably willing to do it, given that you've invested so much in her. So again, you're not going to say, just give me a referral, but you should say, hey, I just want to see, like, is there any last thing that I should be thinking about before I take the plunge here? And that way, when you go into final, closed list and application season, you've given it your best shot. You built great relationships, you cultivated them over time, and now it's time to harvest a little bit. Make sense?
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. And so here's the trick about everything I've just shared. Notice it's 17 steps, so it seems a little intimidating. But just know that all these Ross alums before you guys have gone down this path. Some of them willingly, some of them unwillingly. But again, 30% every single year are finding their jobs off campus. And so if you find yourself disenchanted with the offerings on campus or more passionate about something off campus, know that this is doable. And even though there is work involved with it, it's valuable work because, again, not only does it get you your first job, but these same exact skills are going to get you your 20th job. And so I would say, even if you end up going through this entire process and still taking a job with BCG on campus, it's definitely not all for naught. It's definitely going to be a worthwhile investment in your experience. So I want to thank you so much, Colleen, for being a willing volunteer here on this magician
Oh, thank
stage.
you. This
Oh,
was
yeah.
incredible.
Good,
Hopefully it
good.
was also helpful to everyone else.
Yeah, you are awesome. And I just want to finish up with a couple of final thoughts here. So hold on one second. So let's see here. So we've talked about the various steps. And again, Colleen was so awesome to let us build a list of companies together, find some alums, or as I mentioned here, classmates. A lot of times MBA 2s will be able to help out MBA 1s just as powerfully, just as impactfully as an alum. And then build those relationships just like we talked about. So now this exact same document that Colleen just worked on is actually already live and ready for you at bit.ly/Ross-2JS, 2HJS, excuse me. And so basically, if you head over there right now, you can grab a copy of this. All you have to do in Google Docs is go to File, Make a Copy. In addition, I've also included this file as an attachment right here in GoToWebinar, so you can grab it that way as well. Now, before I close up with some final thoughts, I just want to see if you guys have any questions. So again, these are the steps. And if you have questions about any stage in this process, from building the company list, finding the alums, to getting the relationships in place, please don't hesitate to chat them in right now. Let me go ahead and see what you guys have here. All right. Okay, so a couple questions that have come in. Thanks to you for asking, guys. So Amelia asks, should we try to organize the companies in any way? Small versus large, primary activity versus secondary activity. And I think while you could do that, and I know like as MBAs, we're all prone to analysis paralysis where we have our giant spreadsheets and our giant models and we try to have everything quantified. I would focus on the things that I mentioned here. The alumni, the motivation, the posting. I think those are most critical both to your happiness at the job based on your motivation, as well as how easily you can get the job based on the posting and alumni. So I would focus on those more than anything else, although absolutely you can feel free to customize the spreadsheet to your heart's content. So let's see here. Another question from Amelia. Instead of just accounting for Ross alumni, should we also include other connections we might have at these places? Great question, Amelia. So basically, what we went through here is a very quick overview of LinkedIn, but absolutely, as we sort of alluded to with that idea of the secondary connection, there are lots of other powerful ways to search. So for example, if we come back here, we can build out that search further by not just searching for Ross folks or even Michigan folks, but by folks from your undergrad university. That's a great place to go. A lot of times, as strong as the bond is between Ross MBAs and current students, the bond is even stronger between an undergrad alumni booster and someone who graduated from there. So I think you should definitely add that into your school list. I think it's important to have a large LinkedIn network for exactly the reason that we saw before, which is maybe you're going to know someone who already works there, which is awesome. And even if you don't, if you know someone who's a secondary connection, you can reach out to that person instead. And so I think all those approaches are totally fair game and powerful ways to get in touch. So don't rest on your laurels when it comes to Ross alums. Go way above and beyond that, especially if the organization is smaller. All right, Madeline asked the question, do we need LinkedIn Premium for these features? Absolutely not. Everything I've shown is 100% free. The one thing I'll mention is you have more and more visibility into deeper parts of your network, the more people that are in your network. So for example, if you only have 10 connections, you're going to have a very limited number of second connections. But for me, because I've been collecting connections for a while, I've imported my address book, which you can always do by coming over to here. Let me just show you this real quick. And going to add contacts, so you could add your Gmail or Yahoo or whatever. By doing all of those things, then you're going to have way more secondary connections, which means you have way more access to warm introductions. So even though you absolutely can do the cold outreach process that Colleen and I just went down, if you have someone who can make an introduction, that's far more powerful in your search. So awesome question. Thanks, Madeline. Catalina points out that Boomerang does the exact same thing as some of the tools we mentioned in terms of rebump and follow up then. So check out Boomerang. Great point, Catalina. Nathan asked the question, what's the best time to start off-campus recruiting? Does it vary a lot by industry? Great question, Nathan. And I apologize I didn't address this earlier. So the fact of the matter is, the vast majority of off-campus searches aren't going to go after jobs, that aren't posted until next spring. Imagine February, March, April, that kind of time frame. And so that could seem really scary and frustrating. But the trick is, if you wait until that long to start your networking, you're going to be exactly in that situation that I was warning Colleen about, which is you need a job immediately and you reach out to an alum in desperation. Desperation is never a good set of circumstances to be in when you're asking for a favor. Whereas if you've been building that relationship all throughout the fall and winter, and now the alum is primed to think of you the minute that job is open, that's going to be a way easier sell than showing up at the last second. So even if the vast majority of these jobs don't appear until the springtime, build that network before you need it, which is right now. Let's see here. Satish had the same question, which is absolutely valid. Kartik says, how would you approach this if you're using off-campus searching for jobs outside the US to increase option? Great question. So I would say it absolutely doesn't change the sense. And the reason for that is that all these same tools are universal. So LinkedIn basically covers 400 million professionals around the world today. Gmail, obviously, you can email anyone with an email address. I would say that obviously there'll be cultural nuances and visa implications that you have to be concerned about. And those are great questions to ask alumni. So for example, let's say you want to work in the UK. One question you would ask an alum right off the bat is, are there any options for people, say, with US citizenship to work in the UK? That would be a great sort of sense of, should this bucket of organizations even be on my list? But in terms of the general tools and the general approach, absolutely the same. Eric asked a question, what should we do when there are no alumni at the target company? Should we send a message via LinkedIn, try to find the person's email? So if there are no alums, we talked about other approaches. If you can just find the right person, say like a hiring manager who you want to identify with, a great tool, very quickly here, is called emailhunter.co. And Email Hunter will let you look up the email address for basically any organization. So let's say, for instance, you want to find someone at Google and you didn't have any alumni you could talk to. Obviously, that's not a realistic example given that it's Google. But Email Hunter will say, hey, here's the format. First initial, last name at google.com, like sbrin or lpage at google.com. And now you can start to guess what the email address is, even if you're not using the alumni network. Let's see here. Should we consider off-campus recruiting, says Francisco, if you want to apply to an on-campus company, but specifically for their offices outside the US? I think that's a question you absolutely want to take to the recruiter. You say, hey, I'm really excited about your company, but I have a specific geographic limitation. Like, will I be able to access those opportunities through the on-campus process? And if not, how do you recommend I go off-campus? Like, that is basically how recruiters earn their living, is by answering questions like that. So don't be shy to ask those. And for those who haven't seen it already, for pretty much every job listing that's in the grad leader system right now, there's also the recruiter's name and email address. So you should feel free to contact that person for more information. I'm going to share the link afterwards, Rana, so have no fear. It'll be in your email address shortly. Jyoti says, what about industries like tech and consulting with multiple interesting opportunities? How to boil down the short list? Exact same approach. Like, force yourself to be ruthless as you apply that sorting algorithm and say, okay, sure, there are 100 cool startups, but this is the one I'm most excited about, or this is the startup that has the most alumni, the most job postings. That'll give you a natural place to start so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. Matt Law says, when is it appropriate to share your resume? Great question, Matt. So I would say you never want to share the resume unless it's asked for. The reason for that is the minute you share your resume, all the relationship building, all the sense of connecting between alum and student goes out the window, and now it just becomes a simple transaction. Here's my resume, give me a job. And once you frame it that way, you've lost all the power of what we just demonstrated with Colleen. So don't bring out the resume until they ask you for it. And chances are, if that's the way the firm hires, like if they have to put your resume into their internal referral system, which is the way it worked at LinkedIn, they'll ask you for it, which is what I did when I was helping out students. Okay, so Hannah asked a question. How do you maintain that network effectively after the first contact? Yeah, I definitely apologize for breezing over this, Hannah. What you're going to do is you're going to send an email to this funky address. And again, the address is actually listed right in that Google Doc, which I'm going to share with you shortly. But essentially what you're going to do is go to every 1 month at fut.io, and then maybe you put in Ashanti, or maybe you would just put in a link to your Google Doc, whatever's easier. And this is going to remind you like clockwork through an email that comes into your inbox, hey, it's been a month since I talked to Ashanti, I better follow up with her. So that's a great way to sort of build accountability right into your communication systems. Tyus asked the question, what about an on-campus company, but looking for roles that don't recruit at Ross? So a perfect example is, Apple comes to recruit at Ross for operations and retail, but not for product management or product marketing or a couple of different roles. In that case, again, same advice as looking for a job outside the country with an on-campus recruiter. You want to go to the recruiter and say, hey, I love your company, I love everything about you guys, but I'm really focused on this function. What would you recommend? A lot of times they're going to introduce you to the functional recruiter, so like the product marketing recruiter at Apple, who will then get you hooked up. But again, you now have the advantage of a warm introduction as opposed to cold outreach. So that's really powerful. And then Nathan asked, will there be a recording? Absolutely. You guys are all going to get the recording and the link in your inboxes shortly. I think it's going to come out probably at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock tomorrow, or Eastern time tomorrow. So look for that in your inbox. And if there are any other questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Okay, all that said, let me just finish up real quickly here. So everything said, and I apologize for breezing quickly through those questions. I know, going back to where we started this conversation, it's incredibly tempting to just look at that on-campus search as a quick cheat code to success. What I want to tell you guys right now is that focusing on that process exclusively is only going to cheat yourself in the long run. Because before you know it, you're going to be back out there in the real world. And then when you go up against the final boss, you're going to want to have built up those skills that are going to help you succeed in the long run. Not just here in Ann Arbor today, but for 20 or 30 years down the road and all around the world. Because in my book, learning how to win not just today, but throughout your career, that is the true measure of success. So good luck out there, everyone. Thank you for investing in this workshop. And you know what I'm going to say? Go blue. Thank you so much.